Welcome to the latest webcast in Caring.com's Digital Marketing Academy. Our session today is focused on helping senior living communities better convert online leads into move-ins. I'm Denise Grob, a marketing director here at Caring.com, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Peter Droubay, who I'll introduce in more depth in just a moment. Can go ahead and move forward. Before we dive into the presentation, we want to cover a few housekeeping items. This is a one-way webcast where the presenters speak, and we definitely want your questions. You can ask them throughout the session, either via chat or the Q&A module, and we'll have a Q&A section at the end. One of the most popular questions we get every session is this session being recorded, and can I have the slides afterward? The answer is yes, 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 yes. We will have both the slides and the recording. I hope you see there's a red dot flashing that is recording this session, and we will make that available on our partner blog. Okay, now I'd like to introduce you to our featured presenter today, someone that we're very thrilled to have on the Caring.com team, Peter Droubay. Some of you may actually be very familiar with him, given his extensive experience in the senior care industry. For instance, he helped to build both the Seniors Choice and Hallmark Home Care, two organizations through which he trained hundreds of home care franchises nationwide. But he also has extensive experience on the senior living side. He was one of the original trainers for Caring's team of family advisors who are making referrals to senior living communities. And in fact, Peter is a renowned trainer in sales and marketing in multiple industries, proven track record, has a wealth of practical knowledge. And besides being a phenomenal professional, he's an all-around great guy, has some really wonderful real-life stories that'll leave you with both a smile and nuggets of valuable truth, which I'm sure you'll see for yourself in just a few moments. All right, here's what Peter's going to cover today. He's going to start with the state of the industry and online leads and who we are trying to reach online, and then go through the 10 keys to converting online leads. And as promised, we'll have a Q&A. And yes, the session is being recorded and we'll provide the slides afterward. So without further ado, take it away, Peter.
Thank you very, very much, Denise. It's always fun to hear your obituary before you actually reach the grave. So I'm thankful for that. Always a little bit embarrassed by it, but yes, it's been a wonderful career. As I'm sure all of you that are listening know, that senior living is a phenomenal business to be in, because you get to make a difference for people. You get to go home every night feeling like you've done that, and at the same time, it's a business, and we're in it for a business, and so you get to have the best of both worlds there. So I have loved being in senior care for well over 20 years now, and also in corporate training for many more years than that, and I'm looking forward to this session quite a bit. So let's start off here, and as we go through this, obviously in the time that we have, I'm going to try and touch on as much as we possibly can. So put on your track shoes, grab something to take notes with, and we'll go along. Write down your questions. We do want to get to as many questions as we possibly can, and then we're always here to answer your questions after the session if necessary as well. So definitely reach out to us. But let's start by talking about some trends that we all know of, but it's a quick reminder to let us know kind of where we're at and what the status of things look like right now. So when I first got into senior care, well over 20 years ago, it was about 22 years ago roughly, and at the time, and most of you know this very well because you've been in the industry for a while, is that at the time, everything was done, mostly 99% was all referral and word of mouth marketing within the community. Meaning that the sources of our business came from going out in the community, networking, talking, getting referrals, the discharge planners, the social workers, the doctor's offices, the elder law attorneys, everybody, right? We would go to everybody in the community. We met with networking groups all over the place, right? We did events and we invited people in. There was a lot of word of mouth. The only advertising we really, did much of was obviously we put an ad in the yellow pages, which in most places doesn't exist anymore. But we put an ad in the yellow pages, maybe a little bit of print in, Senior Living magazine or something like that. But most of the business came in through that word of mouth and those professional referrals. But over the last decade or two, especially the last decade, we've seen that shift. And you know what I'm talking about. You've seen that shift where suddenly more and more of the business is coming in online. And in most markets, we had seen, this is before COVID, before last year, we had seen most markets get to a place where it was about 70-30. 70% was still coming from local market referrals, from your efforts out in the community, and 30% of residents were now coming in online. In some markets, right, especially some very tech-heavy markets, a lot of California, some places, some other places that are very tech-heavy, we had seen it get to about 50-50 in some markets. But by and large, we were still doing a lot of marketing and referrals in the community, and then we were augmenting that with online. Well, COVID obviously in most areas has caused a complete flip of that percentage, right? Where suddenly everybody's going online. But this is a trend going forward. Even after we get back to some sense of normalcy here after COVID, what we're seeing is a demographic shift here. The demographic shift is very simple to think about and to point out. All you have to do is think generationally. I'm old enough to have millennial kids here, right? And so when you think about the Gen Xers and the millennials, the generations here that are coming of that age where they're going to start taking care of their parents, those generations do more and more online. They have different behaviors in terms of shopping. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in terms of how do we actually connect with these generations? How do we convert those online leads into clients? But the bottom line is that the internet is here to stay. In fact, it's here to take over. Just imagine what it's going to be like when it's the millennials looking to take care of their parents and to find options for them. Couple things is that they automatically use the internet to begin with, right? They're always on their phone. They're always on the computer. Getting most millennials to pick up a phone and make phone calls is like pulling teeth, right? They're all about the internet, and that wave is coming, whether you like it or not, right? That generation will be taking care of their parents at some point, and therefore they're going to be using the internet more and more and more. On top of that, we have a displaced society. We have people that are moving all over the place. It's a wonderful time to be alive in that there's so much opportunity in the world, and yet it creates some displacement, which means that a lot of the searching, and you already see it, right? A lot of the senior care amongst families happens remotely, meaning that I'm looking for care for my mother who lives in a completely different state and town. And when that's the case, the internet becomes my primary tool. So we are seeing more and more of this business move online. Obviously, we're in the business of doing that, so we see that very closely. We know the numbers. We're going to share some of those with you and some of the best practices. But I need you to know that this is not a temporary shift. This is here to stay, right? It's a major shift in our business. So the very first point here is that if you have not already done so, this is to motivate you to build an online marketing channel. It doesn't have to include caring.com. We hope it does, right? Most of you are already partners of ours. Those of you that aren't, we invite you to become so. But it's more than just partnering with us. It's about building for yourself the sales systems to go along with those leads. And we're going to talk about those sales systems today and how you actually take those online leads and approach them differently. And it is different. Here's the issue, is that we've gotten sometimes locked into old habits based on referral-based marketing. So on the right-hand side of the screen here, you've got your referral marketing, the offline marketing. And in that sense, that type of marketing is still very valid, right? Especially post-COVID. We hope that it comes back into play to a larger degree, but still, it takes a lot of time, effort, and expense to develop referral relationships, to get out there and network and have people know you and make sure that people in the community know where you're at and who you are and trust you enough to send people your way. You get fewer leads, but it's a high conversion because, again, it's a very direct mandate from a doctor, from a discharge planner, from whoever it is, right, that sends you that business. So it's easy to get lazy on other sales efforts because, let's face it, it's kind of nice to get those people walking in the door that have been referred by people in the community that you know. And that's always a wonderful thing. You always want to maintain as much of that as you possibly can. But online marketing here on the left, right, is different. It's fast and inexpensive. You can generate leads immediately and plentifully and inexpensively. In fact, in many cases, it's free to get the leads. There's a lot more leads, but it's a lower conversion rate, and you have to have a different sales system to approach them. Just plugging them into your same sales systems is not always the best solution unless your sales system is specifically designed for it, right? So I'm going to talk to you today about what the best in the industry are doing to work online leads. And they do it a little differently with some different ideas. Not every one of these ideas is going to be brand new for you, but as we go through here, make notes and kind of tick them off and say, how am I doing on this one? How am I doing on that one? If you're doing fantastic on all of them, then congratulations. But I would bet that all of us have a few things that we can improve upon as we work these systems. Now, part of that is that we need to understand who it is that's coming in online. And I just mentioned the generations. Well, typically right now, it's still that younger baby boomer, maybe older Gen Xer. And we all know in the industry, you've known for a long time, I've known for a long time, that it's the adult children primarily that are the drivers. And most often it's an adult daughter. Certainly the sons are involved somewhat, but we all know Mary, right? And we call her Mary here. It could be Karen or Susan or any of the popular names for the generation, but we just chose Mary because that's one of the most popular names for this generation that's currently looking. But the interesting thing to understand is if we're going to attract her and sell her once that lead comes in, we've got to understand her. And she's different from prior generations. She's different from the seniors and from previous adult children looking for their parents, in that she's very, very busy compared to her predecessors, right? She's often still working a full-time job, and I mean full-time. I mean more than 40 hours a week sometimes. And we all know the term sandwich generation, right? Because of the demographics and all the dynamics in society these days, she typically is still caring for a family, meaning young adults, college kids, or even teenagers still at home. And she's sandwiched between them and her parents now that she's taken care of. So she's sandwiched in between. She's very busy with work, with life in general, and now she's got people to take care of, right, on both sides of her. She typically does not do much because she's so busy until there's an emergency, until something prompts her, a medical situation or some sort of issue. Dad's Alzheimer's got worse and he got lost, or mom fell, or something of that nature, right? We've heard all the stories, and we know that there's an impact that happens that moves her into action. And so she's often a little stressed, a little confused, right? A little bit anxious about things, but she and this generation of women and people in general in this generation are very educated. They're very independent and frankly, a little cynical. Now, you probably are listening to me, and you probably are Mary, right? I certainly am. I'm of this generation, of this focus. And the bottom line is she's a little cynical in the sense that we've been given the power to become an expert in anything, and we think we are. So Mary is the type of person now, and unlike generations past, where when she goes to the doctor and the doctor prescribes a medication, what does she do? She walks into the waiting room, pulls that phone out of her purse, and she Googles it, and then walks back in to argue with the doctor about whether it's the best prescription or not. I mean, that's who we're dealing with these days. That's you, that's me. We're all Googling things. We all think we're experts because we've got this computer in our pocket that feeds us information from all over the world. It's phenomenal, but there's that little bit of distrust. And so because of that, she does her research before calling. One of the trends that is fascinating here, and we didn't talk about this a couple minutes ago, but I need you to know it's happening, and in fact, it's happening, is that even your traditional referral sources from days gone by, even when the doctor says, go to XYZ senior living community, or even when the discharge planner says, oh, this is the senior living community for you, that Mary goes and she Googles it first. In other words, even if she's referred to you, she looks you up first. And what is she looking for? The number one she's looking for is consumer reviews. She wants to know not what do you say about yourself. She wants to know what does everybody else say about you. What do consumers say about your community? And she does not always trust individual websites. She's got this sort of jaded idea that your website is meant to sell her, which of course it is, right? She's not dumb that way. You're not dumb that way. You treat it the same way. You figure, well, I'll go to their website, check them out, but I also want to see what others think of them. And so consequently, she also looks for independent third-party authorities like caring.com and the sites that we offer. And she also chooses to speak to people like our family advisors. That's where the leads that we send come from. But obviously, the same things that we're going to talk about today apply to every source of online lead, right? Your own website, the leads that come through some bigger corporate website that you're a part of, possibly other lead generators in the industry. all of that, what we're going to talk about today will apply. And it starts with knowing that it's the same person. It's Mary. This is who we're talking about. And so knowing what I just went through and analyzing who this is, you've met her every day. You probably are her. So what are the things that she wants and needs, and what's her behavior going to be like? That's step number one, is to kind of think, who is it that we're looking for? So now let's get into 10 keys to converting online leads. Now, again, I preface this by saying these are not in any particular order of importance. I sort of tried to order them in terms of, how they're applied in the sales, in a sales strategy. But in order of importance, they're not particularly one over the other, but they're things that when we look at the top at converting leads and the people that aren't, and what are the differences here? And by the way, to that point, I pulled up, in one region, I pulled up a whole bunch of our clients just to show you that there is a massive difference. I pulled up, there was about 700 on this list that I pulled up for this particular region. And we have reports that show how many leads we send them and how many move-ins they get from those leads. In other words, what's their conversion rate and how many moved into other communities in the area. We do this kind of analysis all the time to see, okay, who's really working the leads, who's handling it well, who can we help, etc. Well, take a look at this graph. And I blocked out the names on purpose, obviously. But over here on the left, you'll see, at the top 13 here, right, we have people that are closing a third of the leads coming in, or 20% of the leads coming in turn into move-ins. Huge financial benefit. Meanwhile, we have people, down the list that are getting nothing. So you got to ask yourself the question, okay, what's going on? In fact, many of the people getting nothing got more leads than the people that got something, right? So the bottom line is, what's going on here? Why is it that some communities are able to and I'm talking, this isn't a snapshot, right? When we run this, it's consistently the same communities at the top of the list. The same sales directors, the same communities seem to always go to the top of the list. There's something they're doing. And so in any space in life, right, if somebody's doing better, then the next question is, okay, what are they doing? How do I copy that? How do I model that? How do I duplicate that? And that's what we're going to talk about. 10 key points that we've taken a look at, years of taking a look at who does the best and why. Here's 10 key points that you can put into your sales regimen and say, okay, how do I go about it? Okay, let's start with the first one. The first one is critical to understand and know. And this is one that affects whether, I guess, how ambitiously you pursue online leads at different points in your career. And the first tip is to run the numbers to define success, and only define success based on those numbers. Here's what I'm talking about. There are some important questions that you need to know in your business, regardless of your level in the business, regardless of what your position in your company or your community is. What do you currently spend to acquire new residents? What's a new resident worth to your business? By the way, we just did some analysis for a particular group of our clients, a large chain, and the lifetime value for them of in terms of revenue was 28 times the first month's revenue. So whatever people moved in that first month, they were going to earn 28 times that amount over the lifetime. Those are the kinds of numbers you need to know. What is this client, what is this resident worth to you? And therefore, what's your contribution margin from each of your marketing methods? In other words, how much does each marketing method contribute to your bottom line? When you do that, you start to find out that not only is it the wave of the future, but guess what? Online marketing, most communities that do the math figure out that online marketing produces one of the highest, if not the highest contribution margin of any other method of marketing. And it has to do with the time that it takes. It has to do with, how plentiful the leads are. It has to do with the expense of the leads up front, all that kind of stuff, right? It's much, much more effective to bring in those online leads, even if they don't all convert. And here's the biggest thing. And knowing those numbers now leads to a major paradigm shift that is common amongst the people that do really well. And that is, they know that not every lead is a client. They know that they're going to have to work the leads and work on them in order to get a percentage. And by knowing that, they're willing to push through. And even if somebody doesn't call them back right away, even if somebody says no initially, they're willing to work these leads knowing that they only need a percentage. They don't have to get 100%. In fact, nobody does. Right? It's a lead. You got to pursue it. But here's the problem. If you judge your marketing program, any marketing program, online leads, offline leads, if you judge the marketing program by the quality of your last lead, you will give up and fail at some point, because there's going to be a bad lead at some point. At some point, somebody's going to say no, right? At some point, somebody's not going to call you back. At some point, somebody, horribly in our business, but we all know it's the business, somebody's going to pass away before they move in, right? There's all those kinds of factors that, factor into what turns a lead into a resident. And the bottom line is we've got to be able to push through all those no's in order to get to the yeses. It doesn't take much to get a huge return on investment. Every marketing program must be judged by the return on investment. In other words, I spent this much money and time to produce the residents in this marketing channel, and it's producing this much long-term. When you compare those two, you will find that online leads and online marketing, despite the low percentages, right? You're only getting 10%, 5%, 15%, but even if you only got 5% of the leads converted, it is still the most profitable way of doing business, especially right now. So that's tip number one, is know your numbers and run your numbers. Otherwise, you wind up giving up because you're gonna bump into a bad lead sometime, right? Here's number two. Know your unique selling propositions. And oh my goodness, this is one that I shouldn't have to harp on, but there is a marked difference when I call our communities and their sales directors that are doing really well, and when I call the ones that aren't, in how they tell me that their business operates, functions, and more importantly, what's unique and special about them. Why would I go there? Are they unique and special because they've got the best price? Or is it the floor plans? Or is there something about the amenities? Is it the culture there, the staff there, right? Is the size unique and different? Some people say, well, I don't know how a smaller community sells against the big ones. Well, guess what? Sometimes they sell because they are smaller, right? They say, gosh, you need to come here because it's a smaller atmosphere. Other times the big ones sell because they are bigger. But here's the key. If you don't have a list of your unique selling propositions and how they compare to your competition, then you need to back up and do a little research, right? Shop your competitors. Know what they offer, know what you offer, and be willing. Sales is about showing the highlights, the benefits of what you offer, right? Not everybody has to say yes, like we just talked about, but the bottom line is you've got to be able to understand why somebody would say yes, and how do you stand out? And sometimes that means taking a look at the market and positioning yourself well, right? I've talked to some people, some of our clients that are not getting move-ins, and I go through all the things that we found and figure out, well, how can we help them? And sometimes I say, well, why would somebody move to you guys? What's unique and special? And they go, nothing. I think, oh, well, there's the first problem, right? Is that you don't know what's special about your own community. And then when I go through, I find out, well, they're overpricing themselves. They're, it's the I don't do windows strategy is what I call it, right? There's that old idea that, when you hired the old maid, the old English maid that would come in, the old time, image of that stereotype, and she comes in with a list of things she doesn't do. Well, I've found a lot of sales directors and people in communities that hit you with a list of the things they won't do and don't do right up front, and it kind of turns people off. Right? It's kind of like, okay, thank you for being very welcoming and telling me what you can do. You need to be able to know what it is that you offer that's unique and special and different. Why you? Why come and talk to you? Why move in to your place as opposed to another community down the street, right? What, is it price? Is it floor plans? What is it about it? So there's lots of different things. I just threw a few on the screen here, but you need to decide what's the unique selling proposition. How are you positioned in your community against all the other options? Certainly location, if they're closest to you, that certainly helps. But why would somebody move across town to be at your place? Guess what? The best are able to get people to move further because of what they offer. But they've got to be able to show what they offer, and you do too. So that's step number two. The best, if we're looking at who's the best at converting leads, number one, they're always tracking the ROI. They're always tracking the overall percentages and numbers. They're not worried about their last lead. Number two, they know exactly where they stand in the marketplace and why somebody would choose them as opposed to other people. And they're very clear about those benefits. They don't spend time, telling them what they don't do, right? And what doesn't work. All right, here's step number three. Number three, and this is often missed. I can't tell you how many times this is missed despite us harping on it. Your online image needs to be strong and ever improving. And here's why. Again, this is an old paradigm that people get stuck into, and that is that we sort of treat leads like it was 30 years ago when you bought leads. And I hate to say I'm old enough to have bought leads that were a 3x5 card with a name, a phone number, and an address. That was it. There was no interactivity between those leads. That's not the case anymore, folks. When we send you a lead, or when you get a lead online anywhere, those people also get your information, and they go online to check you out, just like I was already saying. Mary here doesn't sit around waiting for you to call her. She doesn't trust everything that you tell her on that phone call. What is she doing? She's constantly, in fact, most of you know, she's looking you up while you're on the phone with her. And so the question is, what's she going to see, right? What does she see when she's evaluating whether to even talk to you? We're going to talk about this in a few minutes, but Google these days, and again, this is self-serving for them, so I take it with a little grain of salt, but they're pretty close to being accurate, I think. They claim that 90% of buying decisions are made these days before ever talking to the business, meaning that people are looking online, figuring out what they want and don't want, and figuring out what they're going to purchase and not purchase, and then they talk to the business. I don't know if it's 90% all the time, but I will tell you that it's a high percentage, that when any referral comes your way, be it an online lead or an offline lead, Mary is looking you up first. So you need to have a strong online reputation and online presence. Number one amongst that is consumer reviews, right? Caring.com is the largest consumer review site for senior care by far. And you need to make sure that you are constantly working those reviews. If you're already a partner of ours, you know that we give you additional tools to be able to manage those reviews, to be able to hopefully bring more in, right? That's up to you using the tools, but obviously to get more in and to manage your reputation through those reviews, to respond to them, to contest them, to generate more. There's all sorts of things you can do. If you're not a partner of us, you need to talk to us about how to build your online reputation. We don't just sell leads, we sell a program in which your online reputation is a big part of it. Third-party platforms like Caring, your listing on our platform makes all the difference. Are you controlling it? Do you have the best pictures in there? Do you have the best description in there? Have you updated it recently? Do you have old pricing, or do you have updated prices? Guess what? If you're one of our partners, you control all that. If you're not, well, then you need to be, so that you can put all that information in there. Not just us, but across the internet. Is every place she's going to look. Social networking sites is the next one, by the way, right? What do your social networking sites look like, right? What does your Facebook site look like? All the other platforms, articles and blogs and news outlets. What does the PR look like for you? The listing summaries. I don't know if you know this, but when most of you do, if you don't, Google the name of your community there, and what you'll find is that Google pops up a listing summary besides the ranked links for the terms that you put in. So if you put in XYZ senior living, or your name, it'll pop up the normal rankings for those keyword strings, but then off to the right there will be usually a listing summary. It includes the photos, it includes a link to your website, directions, it also includes all the reviews and a whole bunch of other things, questions and stuff like that Google is trying to curate for people now. Guess what? When you watch consumer behavior online these days, they're not going down and clicking your link that much anymore. Again, I told you they sort of are a little jaded about your website. They go over to that listing summary and they don't even click on the website button as much anymore. Some do, but many of them bypass that. They click on two things. They click on reviews and photos the most. So if your photos aren't up to date, looking good and really well done for your community, if your reviews are languishing, if you don't have enough reviews, makes a massive difference, right? So get those things in line. Your listing summaries, online directories. Again, we are an online directory that displays across many sites. I don't know if you know this, it's not just one site, caring.com. We own numerous web properties that are very highly ranked, and we have affiliates all across the net that use our listings and some of our information across their sites. And then finally, all of the media, video, podcasts, all that kind of stuff, the more you can do that way, the more she can find. She is an online researcher extraordinaire, right? Just like you are, just like a lot of the people in the industry in the world are today. So tip number 3 is you got to make sure that your online presence. Now, a couple of stats to back up what I just told you. So Bright Local is a consumer research, online consumer research type of firm. They do a whole bunch of surveys and studies and data collection online. This comes from them among US adults 55 and over. So again, the younger of that is Mary herself. The older of that are the seniors themselves. So we're talking about people in our wheelhouse, people that we're looking for. 71% read online reviews of local businesses. 52% won't do business unless they find 5 stars or higher on those ratings, right? And to trust a business, they read 7 reviews before they decide to trust the business. By the way, the big stat here under the picture, 8 in 10 of us trust online reviews as much as personal recommendations these days. And when I first saw that, I thought, oh, I don't know about that. But then I started realizing, you know what, I do the same thing. You know, if my best friend tells me to go see a movie, but I look it up online, which I invariably do, even though it was my best friend, if the world online hates it, I actually start to question my best friend, right? I sort of trust the online, reviewing, sphere out there. We love to, it's sort of a very democratic idea. We love to see what the masses are thinking. I've bought a lot of things, as have you probably, based on the reviews. So people are trusting online reviews as much as personal recommendations. Now, I call this the modern day drive-by. So we all know, if you've been around any length of time, you know that people used to drive by, and some people would decide not to get out of the car based on what they saw, right? We used to call it a drive-by. People would come over to the neighborhood, they'd drive through, they'd drive by the community, and some would never get out of the car because they make their judgment based on that. Well, guess what? The drive-by is still happening, but it's not happening in a car. It's happening online. If you're not getting, I often get complaints. I hear people say, oh, people aren't calling me back. I get online leads from Caring, from my website, from anywhere else. I get these online leads and I place calls and they never call me back. Guess what? If you're having trouble with that, it'll never be 100%. Some people screen your calls no matter what, but people screen calls these days based on what they see online. If they went and researched online and they couldn't find reviews, they didn't find good information about you, there wasn't, they couldn't connect with you and build that trust online, they will often screen the call and not answer it at all. And there's nothing we can do about that these days. I'll share with you some data later on about how people are answering phones these days. It's getting less and less unless they trust you first. So we've gone through 3. Run the numbers. Make sure that your decisions about operating are based on ROI. Number 2, know your unique selling proposition. Number 3, make sure your online image is strong and improving. And you think, well, that has nothing to do with working leads. It does. I'm telling you, leads these days are not one way. They're interactive. Here's the next thing, and this gets into actually how you talk to people. This goes back to knowing who it is we're talking about, Mary here. Know that Mary is shopping. That's why she went online. She's earlier in the process than what we used to get coming to our communities. So when we talk to the folks that were referred by, the rehab, that is, somebody's getting out of rehab and they need to go to assisted living and now they're sending them to us or whatever community, whatever type of property you're in, those were much further down the road than what we see online these days, right? Online is sort of the first steps that people are taking. It's early in the process. Now, the positive about that is that if you can catch people earlier in the process, I mean, that was always what we wanted to do. How do I get them before they've already been referred somewhere, right? I hate that, the rehab is referring just to that one place, right? How do I get in there? How do I get to know people before they get referred? Well, online is how you do it, but you got to realize that when you hit them early, they're shopping. They don't know what to do yet. And so if you approach them from the vantage point, I hear people be overly assumptive all the time. And there's a point where in sales, you need to be very assumptive and just assume that they're going to become clients. But when we first contact these people, we need to be the local resource that is offering to help them make decisions, not just to come to our community, but to make decisions in general, because Mary is still trying to educate herself. John here doesn't know what to do, and yet his parents are struggling and he needs to get them to an assisted living community possibly, but he doesn't even know the right terms sometimes, right? We get a lot of calls saying, hey, I think my mom needs a nursing home. And then we start exploring it. She doesn't need nursing care at all. They just don't know the terms, right? So you need to come at them. The attitude to take is, I'm going to start by being the ultimate resource and offer them information. Again, Mary loves information. That's why she goes online. So what can you offer on that first call, that first email, that first connection that says, I will help you in your search. I'm not going to be so biased to try and just, put you right into my community. I'm going to help you with understanding the industry. I'm going to help you with the search. So do you have checklists that you can offer them? Do you have an assessment that you can offer? Do you have articles and videos, right, that might teach them more about it? It could be as simple as defining the terms. What's the difference between skilled nursing, assisted living, home health, home care? What do all those things mean? They don't know. What's the difference between independent living and assisted living? What's the difference between that and memory care? At what point does it become nursing care, et cetera, right? All those things, the average person on the street does not understand. And so when Mary's forced to work with her parents on this, she feels at a loss, but I guarantee you she's going to go figure it out, right? That's why she goes online. Is there financial consulting? I know some of our clients that do really well help people. They connect them up with VA consultants, with people that handle all sorts of Medicare, Medicaid, financial consulting. Even if they don't take Medicaid, they'll hook people up with the right consultants to help them with those finances. If they're trying to sell a home, if they're, all these resources. So why not offer those right up front and help people make those decisions? Are there local resources that you can connect them with? What about personal introductions, right? If you let them know that even if they're not coming to your community, you'll introduce them to all the right people. Support groups, do you have those? Again, I'm not saying any one of these is for you, but in what ways are you helping them to shop? Because when you first get an online lead, many of them are in the beginning stages of looking, not the end stages. So treat that with, understand that as you go forward and look for ways to do that. And by the way, that actually goes right to the, the proposition that you can have right up front. If you come in and give them something, right, that is of value, now there's a level of reciprocity that they feel towards you. And it makes asking for a tour, an appointment for a tour, that much easier. All right, here's the next thing. Speed to lead is critical for online leads. Speed to lead is a common term in internet marketing. It says that the faster you get to a lead, the better. We know something about people that are online. They're online, interested at the peak of their interest right now. They just filled out a form asking for help. They put their real name, their real phone number, all their information because they're serious about this. They've got some motivating factor. If we can get to them right now at the peak of their interest, that's the better. So we judge speed to lead in terms of seconds, right? How quickly do we get them on the phone so that we can talk about whatever drove them to request the help? And then when we send it to you, we send it to you immediately after talking to our family advisor. The question is, how quickly do you get to them, right? Are we allowing them to get up and walk away and get involved in other things in their life? Now, you can close leads, online leads, even, if you didn't talk to them for a week, a month sometimes, all those things happen. But take a look at the graph here. If we wait 24 hours, right, it is vastly different than if we talk to them in the first minute. So speed to lead matters. You need to have a system set up where, whether it's an email or a text message, obviously all the leads can go either way for us, but also into a portal. You need to have people that are ready to call immediately and set that system up so that we're getting a hold of people right away. Other methods of contacting besides the phone. The phone is still paramount, but guess what? It's losing ground quickly. Are you texting? Are you emailing? Are you instant messaging? Right? Are you booking calendar events and sending them? Sometimes even without speaking to people, if you can get on their calendar, it helps, right? Social networks, are we finding them on social networks and then friending them or connecting with them or whatever the social network term is, right? Are we sending, again, links to videos, online meetings, right? Are we scheduling and having those where people can join? One of the strategies that works really well for those that you're not reaching by phone is to invite them to an online meeting, an online tour, an online webinar that is a group deal. In other words, once a week, we do a group tour or a group info session or a webinar on such and such a topic. And everybody that hasn't responded, we're inviting them to that, right? It's yet another way to connect with people that aren't connecting with us right away. And even the old snail mail, right? The post office exists and they do deliver. And a lot of people do respond now to mail because it's shifted back and forth. But if you'll send them a nice note, sometimes that's enough to get them to call you back or to connect with them. So are you using these other methods? Do you have that built into your system? The best in the industry they're using all of them. Here's the next one, high call cadence and depth. Unfortunately, the people that don't do well on leads tend to call once and then wait for people to call them back, right? That's the worst case scenario. Actually, the worst is they don't call at all. That happens too. But a high contact cadence and depth is necessary. Cadence is the frequency with which you call. The depth is the number of calls you make before you give up on this. And what I would say is that this needs to be a great nurture system where you literally never give up. So here's a couple stats I told you I'd share with you. In the decade from 2007 to 2017, we saw the connectivity rate on calls, sales calls, almost double, right? Or decrease by 50%. In other words, the number of calls it takes to reach somebody, almost double. Prior to that, it was taking about 3.6 calls to get somebody on the phone. By 2017, it was 8 calls to get somebody on the phone. So calling once ain't gonna do it, wouldn't even do it back in 2007, guys, right? Calling 2 or 3 or 4 times, okay, you're getting more there, but we're at a point where it's even gone up a little bit since then, right? If you're not making at least 10 calls, there's a lot of people you won't reach. And it's not because they're mean and evil people. It's not because they're bad leads. It's not, they went online looking for senior care. You can't tell me that's a terrible lead. They spoke to one of our family advisors for 25 minutes and broke down and cried sometimes on the phone, telling us all the things that are going on and why they definitely need senior care. And so when we send that out, it's absolutely a good lead, right? You just, sometimes they're busy. Mary is running back and forth to rehab. She's working 40 hours a week. She's got meetings. She's got a boss that's on her about being in the next meeting. She's got kids to pick up from college and to, send to college and all this kind of stuff going on. She doesn't always get to the phone. And she's a lot like you. You screen calls these days, so does she, right? So the bottom line is keep calling. You got it. You can't give up after just a couple calls. I'll tell you some of the best practices. We've got several of our clients that literally call 3 times in the first day, a couple times the second day after they get the lead. That's if they're not reaching them, right? Obviously, in the moment you reach somebody, well, that ends that call cycle. Obviously, now you're on to a different part of the sales cycle. Now, we all know this. We know that even after you contact them, it takes several contacts, and the money is in the later contacts. The cool thing is that, if you just do a number of contacts, you're outpacing your competition by a huge amount, right? Most businesses are out of the game after about 3 calls. And this goes across the industry. And I wish it were different. And I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus here, but the bottom line is a lot of people are not calling more than 2 or 3 times, if that. And they sort of have this arrogant attitude that, well, if they don't call me back, then they must not be serious. Well, come on. People are serious. They're just also very, very busy and very, very, worried and stressed, and things are going on. And it's the modern day where they're looking you up and deciding who's called to answer and who's not. And your persistence makes a big difference. So I would set up, if you don't already have it, there needs to be a schedule, right? You don't have to mirror this schedule. I actually took this from one of our partners that said, this is what we do. I'm not saying that this is the best in every case for you, but what if the first day you had an automated system that put you on the phone with them, that made 3 dials, obviously, until you reach them, also sent out a text message, and you were leaving 1 voicemail in that time period. In other words, you're not filling up 3 different voicemails. The next day, you're inviting them, you're sending email invites, you're inviting them to social media, right? You're doing a direct message and you're still making a call, right? The next day you're doing email and text and so on and so forth, right? So the bottom line is you need to build a nurture system that has you contacting people a high rate, a high call cadence, and a high call depth within the first week to 2 weeks. And then after that, a drip system that keeps you in contact. You will find a tremendous amount of business by doing it that way and keeping this high contact cadence and call cadence. A lot of people get worried about, oh, I'm doing it too much. And no, you're not going to do it too much, right? And by the way, this all stops once they talk to you, and you can decide, where do we go from there? And now you start scheduling appointments and tours and tasks and things like that. Here's the next step. You need to have a good sales process and measurement of that process. So you can define your process however you want, but here's a very basic example. You're going to make calls until you contact somebody. Once you contact somebody, you're going to schedule a tour. Everything when you contact people, you don't want to sell over the phone. You're not going to get into benefits and everything over the phone. It's all about the tour, right? So we want to get as many tours on our schedule as possible. And then it's about the tour completion. And not every tour you schedule turns into a completed tour. You know that. By the way, you can shortcut this process if you're working with us, because we will actually set tours for you. And it's about the same, right? About 50% show up. And hopefully you're following up and getting more to show up. But the bottom line is you want to get the tour scheduled, then you've got to get it completed, and then it leads to an agreement. There may be more steps in that agreement process. So you need to know what are the tools I need, right? For each one of these, do I have a script? Does everybody in my business have a script? Do we have a CRM that tracks this and automatically prompts it? Do we have collateral that mixes in here, right? Do we have a scheduling tool that allows us to quickly schedule the tools, and then do we have a confirmation process where they get emails and they get invites and they get further calls to welcome them to the tour? Are we set up with, welcome signs in the lobby when they walk in, all that kind of stuff, right? Do we have a whole process for making sure that this moves smoothly and at the highest level? And then we've got to start tracking the numbers, right? What are the measurements? Because until we have these measurements, we don't know where we're at. So here's what a lot of our top people wind up seeing is that if they start measuring it, for every 100 leads they get, they're able to contact a good percentage, 75% they eventually reach. Now, many of them reach more than that. Many of them report that they're reaching 90, 95% over time. But at least if you're reaching 75% and then you've got to schedule a tour, most people are scheduling tours, the best are scheduling tours about a third of the time. Now, again, we've got some tips and we can get into this in another webinar script-wise on how to accelerate your tour setting percentage if you're not doing that. Part of it has to do with just knowing the process that the next step is to schedule a tour and making sure that everything on that call is about the tour. Then we've got to get them to show up, right? There's all sorts of strategies for increasing the attendance at those tours. And it could be virtual these days. It could be on site, right? I'll leave that up to you. It's either virtual or on site, but the bottom line is we got them to get them to show up for the tour. If you can get half or more to show up for the tour, that's awesome. And then we've got to turn tours into agreements. So if you go through this process, the numbers that I laid out has a 6% conversion. And you say, that doesn't sound very high. But when you do the ROI on that, when you do the math on that, it is huge in terms of return on investment. The numbers are huge. And I just showed you, we have lots of communities that are well above 6%, right? That's how we, in the early part of this demo, of this presentation, I showed you, some of those lists, we've got people doing 20, 30% on the leads that we send them. So 6%, if you can get there, you're doing fabulous in terms of ROI, and you can even build it higher. Now, the last couple of things, we're running out of time, and frankly, they are subjects for longer versions. I'll give you a couple quick tips, but you have to have good call scripts. Everything should be scripted. Now, by the way, on that very first call, a couple quick tips. It needs to not be about your community at all, right? Most people make the mistake. They call up and they give a quick, oh, let me tell you about our community. Our community has this, this, and that, right? It's not a sales pitch at all. It's about them. Number one question that needs to be asked, what prompted the search? What's going on here? What's the pain? What's the issue that's causing us to look for assisted living or memory care or whatever it is at the moment? And then once you know their main motivation, their big hot button, right? Then it's to immediately to induce reciprocation. You know what? I've got a report, a video, of something that will help you in the search. I've got a process that I can send you that will help you. I'd love to give that to you. Induce reciprocation, right? What is it you're looking for? Let me give you something that will help you in that search or in that process. And by the way, another help is I would love to invite you in. I can meet you, talk with you more about it. In the process, we can show you our community and you're booking the tour. So again, we'll go through that script in another webinar. A lot of detail there. We can spend a whole hour just on scripting, but you must have written scripts that everybody adheres to that you use over and over again. If you don't, you're missing the boat. And then finally, as part of that, it's not part of the script, but it should be part of your practice and your training. You need to be ready with all of the potential brush offs and objections. And here's what I'm talking about. When people are faced with an emotional decision, like moving to a new community, like assisted living, memory care, et cetera, right? When people are faced with a big emotional decision, a big life change, there's a lot of fear, and fear causes procrastination, right? A lot of people wind up doing what I call brush offs, where, they know they need this, but it's kind of like when we walk into a store. You've done this, I know you have. I've walked into stores wanting something. Somebody comes up and says, oh, can I help you? And what do I say? No, I'm just looking, right? And then two seconds later, I think, wait a minute, that was stupid. I do need help, right? I don't know why I just said that. And it's because of the fear. My fear is once I engage, I know I'm sold, right? And I'm not sure I've got this little buyer's remorse already setting in. I've got this fear about this big change in my life. If I talk to that wonderful sales executive over at that community, oh man, if I talk to her, This is real now, right? And I'm not sure I want it to be real. So make sure you have scripts and ways of handling objections. All the possible objections, all the possible brush-offs, use them. All right, last tip for you here, and we'll take questions. We're almost out of time here. But last tip is to, if you're not connected with us, get connected with us, because the only way this whole system works is through volume also, right? Now, in some areas, we don't have the greatest volume. You may be in a small town and we don't get that many leads that are qualified, right? But in most areas, we've got a lot of leads we could send you. If you're not already connected with us, get connected with us. As I said, we span across numerous different sites. We have over 80,000 businesses listed with us, over 265,000 reviews and counting. We're the largest review site, highly trained family advisors that work to screen leads for you, and lots of information that people access that way. So that's my little plug here at the end. If you're not currently a client, make sure you become one. And let's go to Q&A here, Denise.
All right, thank you, Peter. We actually got a couple questions related to partnering with Caring and how our family advisors refer to communities. We can't spend a lot of time on that, and we're going to have a monthly webinar for our partners where we go into depth about that starting in March. But could you just briefly give some of the attendees an overview of how many communities and how the family advisor matches the consumer to them?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have a team of family. So first of all, we have over a dozen web properties. Many of them are some of the highest ranked. Caring is the highest in search visibility and keyword rankings across the entire internet. We also own Senior Housing Net. We own Senior Homes. We own Senior Advice. We own Paying for Senior Care. There's quite a number of sites that we own, and people come in looking for help. Along the way, they do one of two things. They either call us directly, because we offer that you can call us directly. We get a tremendous amount of inbound calls. And then they also fill out forms requesting that we call them. We obviously make those calls, talk to those people. Over 100,000 a month are either calling or inquiring in the process. And that ultimately winds up, we screen about 40% of those out immediately, because we have call screeners that will take a look at it. And if they're, for instance, if they're on Medicaid, we screen them out. We send them over to other sources to get help. If they're trying to sell something, or they're a senior looking for a friend that moved into a community. I mean, we get all sorts of stuff that comes in. 40% we disqualify pretty quickly. Of the 60% remaining, we currently qualify anywhere between 20 and 30% on average. And we qualify it based on, we do an in-depth discovery. First of all, we find out what's the main motivation, what's going on here. Then we go through all of the ADLs, right? What do you need help with? Cooking, cleaning, mobility, right? We go through, are there memory issues? Do you need help with ambulation, bathing, toileting, right? We go through it all. We go through all the ADLs and what do we need help with? And we ask about that and find out what's going on here. In the process, we figure out, is this skilled nursing, or is this assisted living, memory care, independent living? Where would be best for them? And we have a frank discussion with them and a recommendation to them about what the right care level is. We then get into finances. And most people, 60, 70% are very forthcoming. We ask them about, their assets, about their income and how much they have to spend and what the budget is here, what the price point is that we're looking in. And then we go searching. And we go searching in our tool of all of the properties in the area that we're partnered with, and so that we can refer them to the properties that match. One of the things that is unique about us in the industry is that we do not send anybody to a community for which they have not expressly agreed that the budget works. In other words, we do not send people hoping that they can find money. Okay, if you tell us that your entry level is $4,000, right, for board and care, right, then we don't send you people that don't have at least $4,000 and haven't agreed to that as part of the price point or budget that is there. We also obviously work based on location, right? We try to get people within a short distance radius. Sometimes that differs if they're looking for different price levels and they might need to go out further. Sometimes they're looking to be near a son or daughter or family member that's not near where they currently live. So we do all of that with seniors, and we wind up referring on average. Our current average is right about 4.5 communities. Again, they want to shop. They want to look at different communities. We try to give them a mix, big, small, etc. And our current average is 4.5. Now that includes people that only ask for 1 or 2, or we could only find 1 or 2 in the budget or in the location. to people that say, oh no, I want to see them all, right? Send me a dozen. We never send more than a dozen, by the way. That's our limit. We don't think that's healthy. And typically, again, our average is it's about 4.5, right? It's in that range.
Thank you, Peter. We got a couple questions about scripting, and Peter mentioned that we can do a webinar on that topic in the future with examples. But I also want to let people know, and I'll follow up with the individuals, that we did a best practices for senior living tours webinar with Steve Moran of Senior Living Foresight, and he went into some scripting in the tour process for sales that could also work in the conversation you have with the prospect by phone or virtual tour. So I'll be sure to circulate that to those of you that are asking about that, and we'll be sure to let you know about any future scripting webinars as well. Another question, and you know about this, Peter, there's some hesitation about calling people or too much, or emailing them too much.
Sure.
They're not answering, or competing with other individuals. And you touched on it briefly, but could you summarize again of what is the counter strategy for those communities that are struggling with that hesitation?
Well, the first one is to get over it, right? They've asked for this information and you're trying to reach them. And, what is too much? They will tell you when it's too much, right? If they unsubscribe from your emails, if they tell you to stop calling, then obviously do so. But the bottom line is that we're trying to reach out to a request that they've made. That's what you need to understand, is that this is not a cold call. They asked for this information. We told them that you were calling. We sent them your information. So keep calling. I can't tell you the number of communities that have said, well, I called and called and called, and after 10, 15, 20 calls, they picked up the phone, and by the time we're done, they thanked me for my persistence, right? We get lots of people that don't move in right away. They'll pick up a phone and move in months down the line sometimes. So we don't know. We obviously get their time frame when we talk to them, but the bottom line is things change for people, as you well know. Life happens, and so sometimes they're in rehab longer than they thought they would be, or sometimes family steps in and says, well, I want to take care of mom for a bit, and then they find out they can't, right? So keep calling. So that's the number one, is just get over that. And if anybody is upset, just say, you know what, it's just, we're trying to reach you with the information you requested, right? They literally have requested this information.
Great. And I want to add a thank you. We had a participant who shared a peer-to-peer tip for the other participants. She shared that she's been having success with her third follow-up being a text message. So she first calls, then she emails, and then she sends a text. So thank you to that participant who shared that tip with others in the industry. We really appreciate the peer-to-peer sharing. Okay, so we only have a couple more minutes, and there was a question about the impact of COVID, and I have exciting news. We're going to have a webinar in March about how COVID has changed online behaviors of consumers, with specific focus on social marketing, including online reviews. So you will have more information on that topic within weeks. And we want to just go ahead and summarize what we covered today. And anyone who didn't get their question answered, we will follow up with you, particularly those that were asking specific questions about their account and our partner portal tool to track referrals, enter rates, and that sort of stuff. Our partner success staff will follow up with you. Really appreciate those questions. Do you want to go ahead and summarize your key points for us, Peter?
Absolutely. There's a shift in how consumers are finding you. Right? It's not a shift that was caused by COVID. It was certainly accelerated by COVID, but it was already underway, and it will continue even post-COVID. It's a generational shift. You must develop a consistent sales system for converting online leads. There are lots of examples. Lots of people are doing it well. And so this isn't a thing of, oh, nobody converts online leads. On the contrary, right? There's a lot of people converting great online leads. And then the 10 keys. I'm not going to run through them all right now, but they're on screen. The 10 keys that we just went through, that's not, I'm sure there's one or two other keys, and, I'm sure that there's other tips that we can expose and give, and we could probably do a whole hour or two on every one of those 10, but it's 10 things to evaluate about your current sales system for online leads.
Great, thank you. How to get in touch with our team. If you're not yet a partner, please email sales@caring.com. Account executive can help you identify or get set up a business profile for your community. And we also have a phone number for those of you that would rather call and speak to an account executive right away. The phone number is on the screen. We really appreciate that you took time out of your day to hear this information. Thank you so much, Peter, for covering this topic for our folks, and we want your feedback. We are going to prompt you with a survey where you can rate this webinar and give us ideas for future webinars as well. And if you don't have time to take the survey now, just go ahead and email us after the webinar. We would love your feedback and ideas. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.